Witchers, welcome back to the Witcher Lorecast. This is your host, Tom, or Robots. I'm here with my good buddy, Toasty of Toaster, Bergentonshire, Hampton Palace. What's up, Toasty? We're talking about spies. We're talking about spies today. When you're a good spy, you have a name that makes it seem like you're from somewhere else, so you can like sneak in, right?
I don't know the exact naming conventions of Redania, so I don't know if that's actually like if this works in this situation or not.
Yeah, well, maybe it does. I don't know. So
I just know that the only naming conventions I know are Vizimir and Radovid. Those are the only two I know when it comes to Redania, really.
That's it. Yeah. So today's episode, we're talking about Dijkstra, Sigismund Dijkstra. I feel like this is the kind of name that you have to say with like a really strong, I don't know, Austrian accent or something. The words seem very foreign to our English mouths.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not gonna try and pin the name origin on this one. So
yeah. Well, Dijkstra is he's an interesting dude. We've got a lot to go over. So where do we start? I mean, he shows up in the games, the books, the TV show. He's all over the place. He's a very important figure. In fact, he's more important than some of the monarchs. So there's that. So where do we start?
He was born in 1219. He was always described as a physically imposing man,
He's a big
nearly
boy.
7 feet tall and bald. And it was said that he had a noticeable stomach that gave the impression of a scrubbed pig.
Nice. Okay.
His eye color actually changes depending on what like he's being presented in. In the books, they are azure, but in the games, the model form have brown eyes, and then in the TV show, the actor has blue eyes. So back on the like azure side of things.
Yeah, I wonder why that was changed in the games. Usually, the game details are really pretty accurate for a lot of stuff that just doesn't need to be changed, like eye color, things like that.
Maybe to like give an impression of less striking as like he would have been when he was at the height of like, so
yeah. Bright blue eyes can be very piercing.
They throw they like kind of throw the whole vibe of a character off like by a lot. So
yeah,
I think it's fair. He preferred to dress in flamboyantly in bright colors. Not like a spy at all, but he was a very clever man, studied at the Oxford Academy, and as we know, had incredible influence in Redania, especially during the time of like the Northern Wars. He had the title of Count, though he was just a commoner, and the Count title was basically just a cover for why he was always spending time with the king.
So was it a legitimate title? Like, was it awarded to him even though he didn't come from a royal lineage? Or was it just something that like the king called him so that he didn't have to justify why this guy was in his office all the time?
I think because like it's weird because like the king gave him the title as a cover for him being a commoner. So like when you're awarded a title by a king, it usually makes your title official, but it wasn't official because he wasn't of royal blood. So
because we talked last week about how the royal lines in this kingdom specifically were so important. And and so
it would have looked real bad for like they was like, oh, this commoner's always hanging out with the king. What the heck? Like, it would have been very weird for everyone involved, probably.
Right.
So,
right. But there was good reason. There's good reason that he was hanging out with the king because he was very useful.
But he did kind of the earliest thing we know about him is when he did draw the attention of the king. He was just a little spy guy,
a little baby spy.
Yeah, in the Secret Service's Novigrad cell, he had obtained documents proving Michael de Nail's incompetence and the tragic situation of the state infiltrated by foreign intelligence. So in 1248, he wrote a letter to King Vizimir II, addressed only for him or for his eyes only.
Your royal eyes.
Yeah,
even.
addressed for your royal eyes only. The king took this information, imprisoned the Count de Nolas, and elevated Dijkstra to position of the royal security assignee.
I feel like this is one of those things that happens in these kinds of stories and historically. And if it goes well for you, then it goes really well because the king has a lot of power. But if the king is
poorly,
pissed off by that information or thinks you're lying, then it goes really bad for you. So this was a risk.
Yeah, but it worked out for him. I mean, he had proof, so luckily he was able to present that. He did a complete overhaul of the service's structure, replacing moles with faithful men and expanding operations from into Kovir and the Nilfgaardian Empire. And then during this time, moved his quarters to Oxenfurt and created this whole setup in the university. And it was also during this time that he started his romantic entanglement with Philippa Eilhart.
Yeah, who is a very powerful sorceress.
Mm-hmm.
So that combination is particularly interesting. Very powerful spy, in fact, leader of the whole intelligence organization, and then very powerful, influential sorceress, both plotting with and against sometimes the king for their own gains at times and convincing him of things. It's quite a combo.
Mm-hmm. But moving on to the First Northern War, he of course had his little bit of a part to play in it. He had faced a huge challenge with the Nilfgaardian military intelligence. Those among the state officials and aristocracy were basically using their in to just throw away large sums of money after they'd infiltrated them, which was causing a bit of a, when you're throwing away the money that you need for war. I mean, wartime is one of the biggest drains on financial resources. So, of course, that was an issue. And then just as things were starting to kind of pick up with Sintra, hearing about, Nilfgaard invading Sintra, they had already had their impact, like the ones that infiltrated Redania, and they had killed a good chunk of the commanders the Redanian army, in their sleep, and burned military warehouses, killed horses. Basically, Nilfgaard set up their agents in Redania, and as soon as things hit on Sintra, they basically put them into full effect and were already trying to weaken the Redanians at the time.
Basically cut the head off the snake before the Redanians were even able to respond.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Man, those Nilfgaardians.
Yeah. I mean, it's a smart move when you're in a war. They're good at what they do. Yeah. But luckily for them, it didn't last long. He was able to put the service's agents into effect and summarily essentially execute all of the traitors that they were able to find. Though there was a lot of collateral when it came to people who weren't guilty of being these spies in their midst, specifically a good chunk of non-humans. Surprise, surprise.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So false accusals and the fallout from that.
Yeah. And the ones that managed, the spies that managed to get away were still found and executed after.
Yeah. We see a little bit of this in the TV show.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a big thing, but there's definitely the whole trying to weed out the people in the community that aren't actually for them, and a lot of the non-humans. Yeah.
Unfortunately for Dijkstra, he tried to trace back the ones that are really entangled in the nobles of Redania, but because of the results of just the first part of the First Northern War, a truce was called, and he couldn't really do anything after that. He was kind of back at square one, which I guess for the spy master is very irritating.
Yeah. I can imagine that. His goal is to weed everybody out, right? But I'm sure, in any other governmental system, once you start getting to the rich and powerful, that becomes more difficult. And then with the war ending, there's no real need to keep doing that. So let's just not do that anymore. That's got to be frustrating.
Yeah. Of course, during this time, the rumors of Ciri's importance were starting to get around to those people who had, their ins. Dijkstra, of course, being one of them.
Mhm.
So in 1266, he recruited Dandelion to be an informant and got Yennefer to basically be his protector in this. Big divergence from the show, the route they took with all of that. She ended up saving Dandelion from Riance because Riance was also trying to torture the information out of Dandelion.
Mhm. So
and
similar things, but a different reason.
Yeah, and Dandelion was essentially put under Dijkstra's protection so that he could not be none of the Nilfgaardian agents could get to him. And meanwhile, he was trying to get the information as well. He was trying to find Geralt and Ciri, figure out where they went.
Right.
He later in June 1267 was informed that Emir had learnt of a planned Aedirnian and Lyrian staged attack on Glevitzingen.
These names are so good.
Yeah, and the Imperial army had now moved into Dol Angra. After receiving a message from King Dimavin III about the attack, he sent word via a royal messenger to inform Dimavin to not go through with the staged attack, as now Nilfgaard knew about their plans. However, it was learned too late, and the message was never delivered as the messenger had been killed in an isolated incident.
So this is the in-between period. This is before things kind of heat up for the Second War. And there's like a staging happening, right? Like the Nilfgaardians are preparing, but they haven't quite, announced war or attacked. There's still a lot of this like underlying stuff going on. And
because they're still fighting regardless of the so-called standstill. I mean, as we know, they had like the natural boundary of the Yaruga between like the Northern Kingdoms and Nilfgaard, but like, you still during this portion, even when you're not like in a full stage war, you're still doing skirmishes to like take out resources, whatever.
You're poking at each other. In
case of Nilfgaard, that is incredibly important for the Northern Kingdoms to address, because Nilfgaard had such a heavy force. Like, you can't reliably kill their forces. You have to like take out the things that keep the forces going.
Yeah, they were outnumbered by like 10 times. If I remember all the details when we went over it.
Yeah, it was an insane number. So moving on to the coup on Thaned, which you haven't exactly talked about a lot of. I'm sure we will pretty soon, given this is probably going to happen. Well, maybe not in season 3. We'll see. The news about season 3, they put out a big announcement trying to spin it all good. Like, there's going to be things no one's ever seen in the Witcher universe before in the next season. And it's like, I don't know if that's a good idea. There was things we'd never seen before in Blood Origin, and
that didn't work out so
we
great.
hadn't seen them.
But
he joined Philippa on Thaned Isle as part of their plan to take out the Nilfgaardian supporters before they could put their own coup in action, because him and Philippa were planning on taking authority for themselves, because royalty can't be relied on, right? Essentially, there was a big banquet, big political talks between like these big sorceresses, names and whatnot. Eventually, he was glad-handing, making deals and whatnot.
Now, Geralt wasn't involved with this?
Geralt was involved with that. He was also there he was there basically. If I remember correctly, he was just on Yennefer's like arm the entire time.
He was just like,
there was a lot of people be like, "Oh, look, there's Yennefer's pet." Like,
right? He was her plus one.
Essentially. But they were planning on like rounding up all the Nilfgaardian supporters among like the sorcerers, and they were going to essentially get rid of them. They were working with Kira Metz on this. But unfortunately for them, the island was invaded by Scoia'tael, and they were basically taking out as many of the Northern Kingdoms, like the ones on the side of the Northern Kingdoms, and were they were just a bit too late, unfortunately, on this. And of course, he was here, and Geralt was there. God, my brain.
Now,
sorry, I have a headache coming on, so this is.
It's okay. It's okay.
Yeah.
So Dijkstra was there. Geralt was there. A bunch of the sorceresses were there. Was this the first time that they actually met in person? I think it might be.
I don't believe so. I believe there was a little bit of an encounter, but I don't know if Dijkstra was. I know there was an encounter in Oxenfurt with Ryance.
But was Dijkstra there? Dijkstra was involved.
I'm trying to remember if Dijkstra was there,
but I don't know if he was there. Yeah. If anybody remembers the details on this one, because this is just kind of a little side note that I was just like, wait a minute, was this the first time? If anyone else remembers, feel free to chime in or send us a note on this. But so the Scoia'tael show up, kind of ruin everything.
They assault the castle. If I remember correctly, Dijkstra puts himself in the way of Geralt's because he's trying to get the information about Ciri. He wants Ciri as well. That's
he's got to keep token. Geralt around in order to get that. Yeah.
Geralt was trying to go after her because I believe Ciri was there. They just kind of missed each other in like the conflict of things because she'd been brought by Yennefer and had been like put up with Tissaia, and Vilgefortz was essentially trying to go after her, and Geralt was trying to stop that. But Dijkstra put himself in the way, so Geralt was forced to fight the Spy Master, who threatened to get like all of his troops to like come from the ships and attack Geralt and detain him. And Geralt was like, "I don't have time for this," so he broke his ankle. And that was kind of that was like the big start of their like relationship because Geralt broke his ankle, and this will be a sore spot for Dijkstra for the rest of the time we
physically
know him.
And emotionally. Yeah.
Yep.
That's great.
So
that's great.
And that was about it for the coup on Thanedd as far as their interactions go. But as kind of getting into the Second Northern War, it was later revealed that the previous night, the coup on Thanedd, that King Vitsamir had been assassinated during all of that. And with the start of the Second Northern War, the country was, or the Regency Council was put into effect to rule Redania, even though technically Queen Hedwig, Vitsamir's wife, would have been the one in charge.
That's such a good name.
But they put the Regency Council into effect, and that was headed by both Philippa and Dijkstra, of course.
Imagine that.
And Dijkstra kind of went a little overboard with this, considering everything that had happened, and began to essentially execute people just relentlessly for 2 weeks, just hanging people, anyone that he thought was guilty of association or anything. Went on a real power trip, essentially. Later, he found out that Geralt was in Brokilon, but told them to like leave him alone, even though he still wanted him to. He wanted revenge at this point. He was pissed because Geralt broke his ankle. I don't know. It's just a real sore spot for him. I'm not sure why. I mean, I'd be upset if someone broke my ankle.
Well, he's a big, imposing guy who feels like he has a lot of control over everything. And when somebody like does something like that to you, you're like, well, you're not going to get away with it. It's. I feel like it's that sort of thing.
He's sent out letters to Philippa. He had heard something that Yennefer had cited with Nilfgaard, and so was essentially trying to find proof of that. Of course, we know that wasn't quite the case because she got turned into a statue and put in someone's pocket. He can't really help anything about that, unfortunately.
Right. Yeah.
But he was doing his spy thing, sending out information, finding information, trying to find Vilgefortz, Yennefer, getting whatever news he could, trying to find Ciri as well. And it was just a long period of, a spy master doing his spy things.
Right. But with more control, because he didn't have to go to the king for permission on things anymore, or at least report back and cover his tracks if he was doing things the king didn't want him to do or whatever. It was more openly in power at this point.
Yep. And later on the path of Vilgefortz, he had received some information that led him to believe that Vilgefortz and Ciri would be together, and was able to actually root out one of or two of Vilgefortz's hideouts, but was unfortunately unable to find either of them present. So, but they did find out.
He's still looking for Ciri. That's why he's going through all of this.
Mm-hmm. He's basically looking for like any like strings of power he can pull, whether it's like finding Ciri because she's like the linchpin in all of this, finding Yennefer because supposedly she's allied with Nilfgaard and so she needs to die. All of this is finding any information he can that could help him either eliminate his enemies or give him the upper hand.
Yeah, more power
in this situation.
Right.
Yeah, because I mean, we see that a lot with Dijkstra of like the commoner who's obsessed, like got into a position of power and just kind of became obsessed with it a little bit. So yeah, it's a common, I feel like that's a common trope. So it's not a surprising thing for people who are familiar.
Well, he can't fall back on like a title of nobility. He constantly has to be proving himself and achieving things. And as he's risen, and especially because he has to do with all of this covert stuff, he's very aware that anybody who can sneak up behind him could stab him in the back, because somebody else who wants his power could probably take it if they prove that they're better at what he does than he is. So you've got that conflict there of now he's in this role and he has to maintain it, and it's, I'm sure, very stressful.
Yeah. And so, I think any good spy master, paranoia is kind of a key thing. Yeah. Let your guard down for an instant. You're used to stabbing people in the back, so you can't let someone else do that to you. Right.
So he discovers some other stuff about Vilgefortz and some experiments and things.
He found out that Vilgefortz had been experimenting on pregnant women, because Vilgefortz was into some very dark shit. Yeah. All right. Well,
he uncovered all that stuff too. So, good job, Dijkstra, I guess.
Put pressure on the dude doing the horrible things. At least he has to hesitate on doing those horrible things for a bit while he's running. So,
yeah. Jeez. All right. Well, we've got more to talk about, but first we have to go thank our patrons. So we will be right back.
Very well. Let us get this over with. Something has infested my vineyard.
Great. Let me go prepare my something oil then.
All right, patrons, welcome to the Patreon. That doesn't make any sense because we don't have any new ones. Welcome to the middle of the show. There we go. Words are hard, guys. But thank you to all of our patrons who support us. We don't have any new ones this week, but we do have our 12 current patrons and our higher vampires, Ben of Temeria and Jared M. Thank you for supporting the show. We really do appreciate it. I hope you guys have taken a look at some of the new stickers and t-shirts that are available over on patreon.com/WitcherLorecast. I think you might like them. And if you'd like to support the show, then make sure you check those out and all the other things that you can get. We really do appreciate that. Also, if you'd like to leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts, we'll read it out on a future episode. We don't have any new ones this week, but we'll make sure to do that. And Genesis, who's in chat, pointed out in our Discord that Spotify has a big update, and on episodes of the show on Spotify, there's a little section that'll say, what did you think about this episode? Or we could put up like polls and stuff. So if you want to respond on there in order to send some positive vibes our way, like, hey, I really enjoyed this episode, or I didn't know this thing about this person, or whatever, feel free to do that, because you can just do it right now on your Spotify app if you're listening on Spotify. It kind of works like a review, but it's not for the entire show. It's like a comment on the episode individually. So it would be a little bit difficult for us to read all of those out because of just the complexity, and also it could be like dozens of them as opposed to just a review for the show. So even if we're not going to read those out on a future episode, please help us out and drop some positive comments in there and let us know what you like about the show. We would appreciate it. And again, it does help people because I'm sure they're going to look at those and read them. So thank you to all of your support. And let's get back to the rest of the episode.
You smell of death and destiny, heroics and heartbreak.
It's onion.
Right, yeah.
All right, we're back, and we're now talking. Is this like post Second War period?
We're still kind of we're still, something like that. It's kind of in the midst of things with it. It's because sort of.
Okay, well here, we'll
it's sort of post-war, sort of like towards the end of war, because the end of the war has not happened yet.
I got you. But we're getting close to the end of the war, and then this next passage kind of goes into the post-war stuff. Okay, that makes sense. Got it. All right, so what happens next?
So same year, later in October, he travels to Lanexeter, the winter capital of Cover and Povus, and tries to barter with the leader, King Estrad Tyson, to essentially get a loan of 1,000,000 byzants so that he can try and raise an army in time for spring.
And this is what armies do. This is one of those traditional things in that most militaries, especially during like a medieval period, didn't fight in winter weather because it was not useful or beneficial to anybody. It was very difficult. And so armies would go on break come late fall, early winter, and then would resume again in the spring when the weather got better. So especially in the northern kingdoms where it gets really cold, this makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and especially because Nilfgaard would not want to push in during the winter time for the harsh winters that some of these places have. So, but he spent some time there. He was refused the loan because it would mess with Covir's policies on neutrality, and they had an agreement that they would not back Nilfgaard's enemies, specifically. So couldn't exactly receive direct help. However, the king's wife, Zuleika, gave him advice that showed him a loophole and was thus able to supply the spy master indirectly. And even despite the denial from Estrad, they still had struck up an unlikely friendship. So he spent some time there or spent more time there than he anticipated, having like philosophical debates, getting words of wisdom from the king, who was basically telling him that he needed to stop the bloodshed, or there was going to be assassins coming after him, most likely, because Dijkstra wasn't exactly proving a very likable fellow in this time period.
I can imagine. Yeah. I think he's just kind of not a super great guy to have to get along. I mean, I feel like if you were going to have a conversation with Dijkstra, it's going to be all business, and every other thing he's telling you is probably not the complete truth. At the same time,
for sure.
That's just kind of how it goes.
Post this trip to Kovir, he started to develop some suspicion towards Philippa Eilhart and the circle of sorceresses that she was involved with at Monte-Calvo, when the Lodge of Sorceresses was kind of coming into being at this time. He spent the time raising troops, of course, keeping it and using his assistant, Ori Reuven, which is a name that he will use later on, or part of that name later on for himself, secretly with his assistant, specifically secretly from Philippa, because he didn't want her to know. He started to reform the Order of the White Rose into the Order of the Flaming Rose, with the specific aim to balance the rising position of sorceresses and aid the forces fighting Nilfgaard with a strong knightly order.
So is this related to the religious stuff that was going on with mages being persecuted and all of that?
I think it'll start to lead into it.
It's kind of like the precursor of the stuff that we
yeah.
see in The Witcher 3.
Yep. So
Yeah.
because I think this kind of ideal is what has like a heavy impact on Radovid, the king that will come afterwards, who is the one we know, like who persecutes all the witches and stuff later on. So
Yeah, so this is kind of the seed that grows into that. That's pretty cool. I mean, it's terrible, but it's a cool a concept that this is the way how it happened. Yeah.
Yep. And so he started to also during this time try to spread out his like spy network into Temeria specifically. Essentially, that's just what he was doing with that. And he does during this time find out. I believe that Philippa was responsible, or not responsible, but had a hand in assassinating Vizimir, which really does start to sow that he was suspicious, and now he's like, okay, I don't like you. And this will start leading into the downfall.
Right. So it wasn't something that they were in on together. She did it on her own, and then he wasn't cool with it.
Yep.
Yeah.
And also after this, he does get a letter from Geralt. I'm sure he was very surprised by that. Who informs him exactly where Vilgefortz's hideout was in Stiga Castle in Ebbing. But unfortunately, that was a bit too far south for Dijkstra to have a hand in. So he essentially made deals, let a significant figure in the Temerian intelligence know about it so that they could pursue the lead in exchange for the details on Vizimir's assassination.
Yeah, so he's working deals between other organizations to do things in places that he can't quite reach himself. And that's how it came about the information. Interesting. Okay.
And then we start to get into the end of the war with negotiating peace, or the peace of Sintra, negotiating peace with Nilfgaard somewhat.
Which, of course, is going to last forever, right?
Yeah, of course.
Of course.
So, of course, Queen Hedwig technically still supposed to be the leader of Redania, because her husband died, so it passed on to her. But she was still not in a mindset to be a ruler. So when all of the other kingdoms rulers met in Sintra to discuss the peace in April 1268, Dijkstra was sent along to join them. However, he was, of course, like we said before, non-royal, and so he did receive quite a lot of flack.
Yeah, he was showing up to speak on behalf of the queen, but the other rulers were like, "Who is this guy?"
Yep. But regardless, they still peace was still negotiated, and he went back to Tredagor, in the capital of Redania, and proceeded to pack his bags as he found out that Philippa had intended on sending assassins after him now.
Right. So this is where it starts to come down, right? Like the whole, you got to watch your own back. You're not as in control as you thought you were.
So he had let a little bit too much slip about the information he had about Philippa being involved with Vizimir's assassination.
Yeah.
So he found out she was going to send assassins after him, or assumed that she was going to send assassins after him. Because of that, he said goodbye to his assistant and essentially fled the country to avoid being killed. Later meeting up with Isengrim and Boreas Munn, fellow fugitives, and the three of them agreed to travel east to Zerkania or Hockland, and Dijkstra took on the name of Siggy Reuven.
Siggy
as
Reuven.
his alias.
Now, this isn't...
Reuven being his assistant. Yeah.
Right.
So...
Right. Now, this isn't the end of his story, because this is like the end of the book part of his story. But The Witcher 3 follows, well, the Witcher games in general follow the events of the stories. And in The Witcher 3, Dijkstra plays a significant role, but he's no longer at the height of his power. He's decided to find other means of maintaining control.
So, so moving on into The Witcher 3, Geralt does run in, or you as Geralt will run into Dijkstra yet again, where you find him in Novigrad, and he has essentially built up this criminal empire, along with 3 other criminal lords. They are known as the Big Four. And we have a bit of the journal entry that kind of talks about Dijkstra in the game. Yeah.
About Siggy?
Yeah. Siggy Reuven.
Should I read this?
Sure, go ahead.
All right. So the individual masquerading as Siggy Reuven was in fact none other than Sigismund Dijkstra, the former head of Redanian intelligence, and a man Geralt and I had many dealings with in the past. He had fallen out of King Radovid's favor, and nothing had been heard of him for many years. Now it seemed that he had finally decided to emerge from the shadows, but instead of returning to high political wrangling, he dove deep into the criminal underworld, or underground. Same thing. And quickly surfaced as one of its leading figures. Though he did not show it, in his own way, Dijkstra respected Geralt, even though the very thought of their last meeting brought a pained grimace to his face. The ankle. The two had found themselves standing on in each other's way during the coup of Thanid Island. The stalemate was quickly broken when Geralt summarily broke Dijkstra's leg. This spy's life story would make for a positively enthralling adventure tale. A victim of Philippa Eilhart's intrigues, he had been forced to flee Redania at breakneck speed, or have his own neck broken by assassins. For a certain time, he sought refuge in far-off lands, but in the end, he decided to return to the free city of Novigrad. Well aware of Geralt's extraordinary talents, Dijkstra asked him to help him find his stolen treasure. Though Geralt knew the identity of the criminal's mastermind responsible, he decided not to divulge this information and set about investigating as if the case were a complete mystery. Though the Witcher's lips remained tightly sealed regarding my role in the treasure heists, Dijkstra still sniffed out his dishonesty and made it clear that he disliked being played for how much he disliked being played for a fool. Okay. Words are hard. Though Dijkstra did not aid the persecuted mages out of the goodness of his heart, Triss appreciated his support all the same, for it proved vital to the endeavor's success. Dijkstra opposed the mage hunts sweeping the city, but for Philippa Eilhart, he was willing to make an exception. He had never forgiven his one-time friend for betraying and then trying to kill him. Unfortunately, Geralt needed Philippa alive and knew how to free her. Though Dijkstra craved vengeance, he was willing to resign from his plans in return for valuable information. Anyone who thought Dijkstra had broken all ties with the world of political schemers and plotters was sorely mistaken. His great comeback was to be a patriotic act that would free Redania from the rule of a madman, the assassination of King Radovid. So, yeah, interesting stuff.
Yeah, so, of course, he's involved in a fair few quests. If this journal entry, if you couldn't tell, written from Dandelion's perspective. So he's involved with that because Dandelion stole significant amount of money from him, helping Triss get the mages out of Novigrad. Those quests, but probably the biggest quest that he's involved in was Reason of State, where you're trying to assassinate Radovid. And you can either assist, of course, in the assassination, or you can choose to not, in which case I believe that is the swing factor in Redania winning the war against Nilfgaard if Radovid stays alive. So nothing major there. If you don't help, we do not know the results of what Dijkstra afterwards.
Okay.
with his involvement, because I still believe he goes through with it regardless. We just don't know what happens because we just chose to stay out of it. But if you do get involved, Dijkstra does try to betray the group that he involves in this afterwards. So a little bit of that. This is also part of the journal entry as well. As an experience, if Geralt intervenes, as an experienced dragon slayer once commented, more than once heads have only rolled after the dragon's been slain, the mead broken out, and the campfire lit. For when it comes time to share the treasure, hunters of beasts often become slayers of men instead. Such was the case after the assassination of Radovid, when Dijkstra tried to renege on the terms of their arrangement and do away with Thaler and Vernon. Dijkstra counted on Geralt maintaining Witcher neutrality in this matter, a miscalculation which cost him his life.
Dun, dun, dun.
And if Geralt does not intervene to protect Thaler and Vernon, with this move, the former spy achieved his goal, fortifying himself in a position that allowed him to continue the war against Nilfgaard, becoming Chancellor of Redania and bringing in a new era of manufacturing to the region.
Yeah, but we don't know which one of these is canon.
Yeah, we don't. So it's sure we'll find out in 8 years when the next game comes out. But
hopefully it's not 8 years.
Yeah.
But yeah, okay.
Yeah. And that's about it for Witcher 3. We also do get a little bit of Dijkstra in the other forms of media, the Witcher adventure game, the Gwent game. And there was even a like non-canonical short story, like specifically said to be non-canonical by Andrei Sapkowski himself. But is called Something in Something Begins, where Geralt and Yennefer get married. And he was invited to the wedding, but he decides not to go.
That's hilarious.
Yeah. So, but it's obvious that Dijkstra is a very, very big like name in The Witcher, because he's kind of in almost all of the assets. So
yeah, well, he's a much more capable ruler. I mean, he's not a good person by any means, but he's much more capable than some of the other nobility and some of the other kingdoms and kings and queens and whoever. So, and you know, he falls and gets back up, as we see in The Witcher 3, and that's, you know, there's got to be some credit due there.
I mean, I do like, until it gets to that part, like specifically of the assassination quest or whatever, I do like him. Like all of the interactions, I'm like, okay, this dude's cool. Like you even get like kind of a vibe that like you could be friends, like in the grand scheme. But then,
right, you have to respect his capability. He's extremely capable, and I think that's where that mutual respect comes between like Geralt and Dijkstra, is that like these are both extremely capable people, and you have to respect that at least. Yeah. So, well, we get him in the Netflix stuff, but only a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. We've only seen a little bit so far. I'm sure we're going to get more out of him next season. But he's, we're not sure yet specifically about like how much his mannerisms may have changed, or the methods he takes, or where his story goes, or if he has the same kind of backstory, because he kind of just shows up in a cool moment of catching an assassin, which, you know, it's cool. We're not entirely sure where or how much difference there is yet. But he has had his hands in a couple big things so far in the Netflix story. He does, of course, find out about the elves and Nilfgaard, like kind of camping out in Sintra. So he sends the spy over there to basically be his eyes and ears on that whole situation. I just had his name, but it like slipped my mind.
Yeah, I can't remember his name either. But if you've seen it, you know the guy that's the elf spy.
Yeah, he was friends with Ciri in the first season.
Right.
Right.
So, and then he starts feeling like sketchy about what he's doing and while he's over there and all that. Yeah.
Yep. And then he does have a bit of a meeting with the Brotherhood. He informed them that an elven baby had been born of a mage, Francesca's child. Arterius and Stregobor saw this as a potential threat. They were already aligned, or who were already aligned with Nilfgaard. Tisaya and Vilgefortz didn't really care that much about the information, though. Stregobor only cared about the information because he was racist. Let's be honest.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And he essentially, Dijkstra said that today's gossip, because they called it rumor and unsubstantiated, and so today's gossip was next month's news, and that he had heard that Triss had returned, and the council had not yet heard about that. So basically, like, hitting them with info that they had not yet known about. Kind of a flex move. And then he does discuss, he has a scene where he talks with King Vizimir about basically getting Ciri so that they can implement the, someone having power over Sintra.
Right. Right. It seems like a very much a setup scene for things that we're going to see.
Like, we don't see, it's all kind of set up with him. We do see like a bit of a scene where he's kind of like doing his calculations, and he looks like he's having kind of a fit of madness.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure
weird.
if that's a hint of like how he's going to end up being is like a bit crazier.
Yeah, it seems like they're going in that route, and he's an interesting enough character on his own. You don't need to make him insane or something like.
Yeah,
but who knows? Who knows what Netflix is going to do? They're going to do whatever they do, and we'll see where it goes.
Yeah,
but yeah, hopefully they do him well, because he is one of the most interesting characters in the series, and will have. I mean, when he gets involved with things change. Like, he has a noticeable effect on everything that he gets his hands in. So,
as a spy would do. So
yeah. Cool stuff, Toasty. This has been fun. This is a great episode, and thanks for filling us in on all of that stuff. You got anything else going on you want to share before we head out?
Same stuff as usual. Still doing the Cyberpunk Lorecast. We just did an episode on Japan. So getting into some of the tea there. And then I also do the Cyberpunk Red Actual Play podcast, Cyberpunk Apostrophe D, with the Fumbling for an Almighty Crit Gang.
Yeah, let's go check that stuff out. Links over on robotsradio.net for all of that stuff, and my shows as well. So if you're into any other series, that like any of these other video game series, or the Lord of the Rings, I've got Lord of the Rings, Elder Scrolls, Fallout, Mass Effect, a bunch of other shows, Starfield, but that got pushed back to the fall. So if you're into any of that other stuff and you want more podcasts to listen to, just go check them all out. Go listen to them all at the same time.
Simultaneously.
It'll be weird. But
on 1.5 times speed. No,
yeah. We've set them all up. It's one of those things that we worked a lot on that actually works if you play them all at the same time, and it turns into a completely different show. So give that a try. But we'll see you guys next time. Toasty,
stay safe on the path.
We'll see you then. So see you later. Bye, everybody. Thanks for tuning in to the Witcher Lorecast. We'd love to hear about your experiences with the games and the books and the TV series and all your thoughts on everything. Please check out the Robots Radio Discord and follow us on Twitter at Witcher Lorecast.
You've been listening to a Robots Radio podcast. Smart shows for interesting people. Check out all the shows at robotsradio.net.